without much ado, I would kindly invite all the panelists to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Ms. Biko, and then I get to Pam, then Prince, and then Tam, in that order.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. My name is Kobia Biko. My name is a mixture of South African and Kenyan name, but I'm Namibian. I'm in Johannesburg at the moment. Well, I've got a background in my academic background is in English and English major. And then I have got a postgraduate diploma in journalism, a master's degree in law, degree in law, and a master's in law as well. I'm currently doing an MBA in Salford University. It's an online course on business and international trade. But I've consulted for the United Nations. I've been a lecturer sometimes about 5 years ago when I stopped and joined business full time. Currently, I'm a businessman, and I've got a business in South Africa, Kenya, and Uganda as well. So that's my background basically. I'm background in media, background in language, as well as law and business. That's my background. And I'm also an author. I've written 2 books about Africa, and the other one is also about socioeconomic issues about Africa, which has delved a little bit into the Zimbabwean issue. So essentially, that's my background.
Welcome. Is it okay if I call you Kobe?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. And now if we may move on to Pamela.
My name is Shido Pamela Mafuoya. I'm a legal practitioner. I'm currently practicing in Zimbabwe for the past 5 years. I had an LLB from the University of the Witwatersrand in 2015. I'm currently doing my master's at the University of Western Cape in international trade, investment, and business. Presently, I am in South Africa, in Durban, just completing my thesis, and yes, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Maybe if we can then just get into the discussion. What really are we talking about today when we're saying that we are focusing on African economies in focus? So basically what I want to hear from the panelists is pretty much the economic situation that's in Zimbabwe, what's going on, what's on ground, the history, if there is a history, is there a background, pretty much what's happening in Zimbabwe right now in terms of economy. So I will try to remind the other people who are part of this conversation that it's purely going to be limited to the economic aspect of what's happening in Zimbabwe. So we will not really be responding to any questions that seem to be political. So maybe if I may start with Kobe, what do you understand by the situation currently in Zimbabwe? What's happening and what's the history behind generally? Then after you, we can go to Pamela. Whilst we're waiting for Kobe to probably rejoin the conversation, maybe Pamela, if you can then just respond to the question that I addressed.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole, for the question. Zimbabwe's current currency is various stages. From the time of independence, that's about 1959 to 2009. Zimbabwe officially had that was named. And then from the time of about April 2009 up until mid-2015 was the stabilization stage, where Zimbabwe stopped printing its own currency into the system, and that's the government of national unity and using the US dollar, the new currency in Zimbabwe. And up to from 2015 to 2019, in 2019 actually, that's when we announced that the US dollar has been banned, and we're now going to be switching to the Zimbabwean dollar, and foreign currency is going But up until June 2009 till date, foreign currency now again become legal tender only in relation to the purchasing of goods and services. So in a nutshell, we can say the Zimbabwean economy has actually experienced a lot of there's been an economic crisis and a lot of hyperinflation because we've seen that the markets and the currencies that keep on changing had a bad impact on the economy. So we can term it of being an economic crisis in that sense. We've not really experienced any stable from the time around 2007 for a number of various reasons, which caused the economy to decline from that point. I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yes, you have. Thank you so much. If we may have Kobe, I think is back online. Kobe, we are basically talking about the historical background of our conversation, what's really happening in Zimbabwe, the currencies, the economic situation. From your understanding, maybe you can then just give us the brief background.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope everyone can hear me. What I understand is that, the Zimbabwean economy was just faring as good as any other economy until a certain point, which actually, if you look at it, you can never define what happened in Zimbabwe without looking at some issues like cultural identity, power play, and global, the global overlay on the African continent. And actually, if you look at what happened in 1998, when land was kind of taken from the white farmers, is that from that point up to the time when sanctions were imposed in 2002, Zimbabwe has been on a decline economically. And the factors which causes this situation to be what it is, they are mixed, including politics. But mostly, let's cut down to come to economics. When the sanctions were imposed on major businesses, on major or key personnel who are in charge of the Zimbabwean economy, and as well as agriculture produce, of which Zimbabwe is one of the, it was like the producer of food in Africa. It was known as one of the biggest supplier of food. It was self-sustaining in terms of its, food supply. And then when land was taken, which meant that there was a change in the way land was managed, food went down, the production of food went down. And upon that, the economic sanctions actually made sure that there is nothing produced in Zimbabwe which could be exported into the international market. And when you look at what happened after that, there was what we call economic meltdown. And that meltdown has continued to this point, where now the new government is trying what it can to salvage what is remaining of the Zimbabwean economy, because all the key indexes of economics are not ticking in Zimbabwe. There is that situation which you cannot define without touching into politics. But since you said we are not delving into politics so much, I would suppose that the economic meltdown, the disappearance of key indicators of what makes a country's economy are the ones which have caused Zimbabwe to be where it is now. Maybe we'll touch on that as we go forward.
Wow. Thank you so much for the detailed response. So you really raised important questions. I mean, you really raised important issues, so to say, particularly with what's happening in Zimbabwe. And maybe having spoken of the sanctions, the economic sanctions that were imposed on the country, this therefore begs the question, really, how are the people in Zimbabwe, living? How are they surviving? How are they trying to go around the situation? Because clearly he has been on a decline for a very long time. So what is it that people in Zimbabwe are doing right now so that they survive? And also, how has the sanctions, so to speak, how have they negatively affected the common Zimbabwean person, the one that doesn't own businesses, the one who's probably in the resettlement areas or in the rural areas? How have they been affected? And with so much effect, how have they tried to probably circumvent the situation and see if they can survive? So yeah, I'll start with Pam again.
I mean, staying in Zimbabwe and living, it's a really difficult economic situation. But most people have resorted to formal sector because also there's a high unemployment rate. So you've seen that most people are now like engaged in cross-border trading, um, selling on the informal market, whether it's be food things or clothes or and doing small businesses like your SME, but really on mostly on the informal sector. We have also seen an increase in farming activities, either it be horticulture or maybe at a smaller scale, and also in mining. Zimbabwe's balance of payment position is deteriorated significantly since the introduction of the sanctions. Not only that, Zimbabwe's access to international credit markets was also blocked after the enactment of the era. And due to that, um, it has been very difficult for Zimbabwe to operate even on the international market, and the country has been forced to virtually operate on a hand-to-mouth. There's significant built-up now of external debt. The country's credit worthiness has it's also been affected because it's seen as a country at a high international financial risk. So when dealing with most other countries, because it's been branded as risky financial country, its entire financial linkages in the world are also at a higher risk. So it's made the country a compelling target for de-risking interventions by lending corresponding banks in the US and Europe. So before this trickles down, it is on a country level, but it then trickles down to ordinary person. Because when you see all these factors and how they affect the country as a whole, means then the ordinary person is also affected because there's no money moving in within the country and it's not really supposed to. And it also affects unemployment and production and manufacturing. So most people then have had to resort to informal ways of trying to make a living. And for what we can say, people are actually trying to. People are really coping pretty well with the informal sector, and obviously there are some who have, it's a difficult economy to survive in, but we can't say sure that there are good people who are thriving in the economy. So I think that's my way of answering that.
Wow, that's really interesting. Maybe if I can go to Kobe, if you may probably speak more on this whole concept of hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, the flip and flops in the currency, and also, as Pam said earlier, that we have gotten back to the Zimbabwean dollar, but we still have people informally trading and foreign currency, US dollars and South African rands, which has led to the proliferation of black market dealings with regards to foreign currency. So how does that affect the economy? Does that affect the economy more? And also, what is it that can be done from an economic perspective? What really should the country do? What should the policymakers really do to try and curb this situation? Maybe you might also want to speak on the securities market itself, because I remember there is a time that there was a circular that was circulated that all trading on the securities market had been suspended by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe due to the current economic situation. So all that having been coupled, how then does it affect economic situation? How does it affect maybe economic growth within the country?
All right, thank you. Well, you asked about hyperinflation, and one of the things which happened in Zimbabwe about hyperinflation and inflation in general is that the prices of the commodities started increasing when the sanctions were put in place. What happens immediately after the economic sanctions are put in place against a particular state or government is that the investors who had invested in the country, they close down and run away. Why? Because the prices of the commodities keeps changing. If you have been in the business, or if you have started business, you may know that if you're in the factory process and you're producing something, and that product, when it's in the market, is costing maybe, let's say, 10 units of the currency, let's say $10. And then when you venture out again in the evening, you find that the same product is because of the currency, the price has changed. You can just recover about $8, and tomorrow you can recover just $5. And the other day there was hyperinflation is the process where the prices increase to a level where, as they put it in the books, it says more than 50% on monthly basis. So if something was costing $10, next month it will be double that price. But it does not mean that because the price has increased, the currency is tied with the GDP. That is why the hyperinflation comes in. Every month there is a 50% increase on the price. Now, with the Zimbabwean situation, after the economic sanctions, many people who were in the manufacturing left. The traders also left because money became valueless. The government also was incriminated itself by printing more money and putting it in the economy. It could not be able to pay its debts. It could not be able to service its bills. So the government resorted to printing money at the beginning. And when the producers of products left, agriculture was affected because the white farmers left. Traders who had camped there in Zimbabwe, who had small factories, they could not sustain the onslaught of the fluctuation of the currency. So as well, they left because the money became, Zimbabwean dollar, that is, the Zimbabwean dollar became not able to be used. It kept changing and changing until the inflation arrived at, a percentage. There's some place I looked up and they said it had gone to millions in percentage in the way it lost its value. I remember one gentleman showing me one note of about 1 billion. So that's in itself is unsustainable. So the prices increased. The people left who are involved in trade, and therefore, as the previous speaker said, Zimbabwe resorted to doing cross-border trade. They resorted to the informal sector. At a certain point, it was seen that the informal sector in Zimbabwe sustained the Zimbabwean economy, and that the informal sector, was responsible for 98% of what the general trade which happened in Zimbabwe, the informal trade sector. So that by itself shows that, one, there were no goods in the country because the producers were not willing to come in and trade. Secondly, the currency became useless. When the currency became useless, it was difficult to know which currency you're going to trade on because it kept changing. Everybody was like, somebody who is in the black market involved in changing dollars, changing money. It became like a black market place, a place where 98% of the trade was sustained by the informal sector. Don't forget, at the same time, the economic sanctions affected the mining sector. They affected the agricultural sector. And another thing which was targeted very much was the financial sector. Zimbabwean banks were kind of cut. They were cut off the international, circulation of currency and all that kind of thing. So, as you know, as it happens in Africa, the people in government, the top people in government, they're involved. They have shares in this bank. They have shares in that insurance company. They have shares in that. Where there is liquidity, where there is money, that is where they have shares. And these are the people who are targeted by the economic sanctions, because the economic sanctions targeted individuals or high-ranking personnel, and as well as key industries. Now, if you look at any situation over in Africa, you find that we are involved in what we call extractive industry. Africa, first of all, is involved in about 1.7% of the international trade, of which that 1.7% is involved in extraction industry. So we're talking about mining, right? We are talking about, what is the production of maybe agricultural produce, coffee, tea, right? So fishing. These are raw materials which are later, transported to areas like in Europe or Asia or somewhere else where the value addition is done. And when that, with the Zimbabwe situation, it was that the hyperinflation caused the currency to totally disappear. It was not used anymore. They experimented with the South African rand. They experimented with the US dollar. At a certain point, they almost allowed any other currency to come into play. So that by itself made trading difficult in Zimbabwe. No business person would go in there and set up a shop, a factory, produce products and sell to the Zimbabweans. Now, what that resulted to is that Zimbabwe became part and parcel of the South African economy. I started to be corrected, but I've been observing this for quite some time and saying that the best solution to this situation is to allow Zimbabwe to be economically part of South Africa. This is the solution I have for Zimbabwe at this point. It does not take away any sovereignty at all, because I'm not talking about maybe economic sovereignty, yes, but the political sovereignty is intact. You got your president, you got the flag, and you got your identity. But when it comes to a solution, economic solution at this point, and I wish that this can reach the ears of the major decision makers in Zimbabwe, the solution to hyperinflation, the solution to economic meltdown is to integrate the Zimbabwean economy with the South African economy at this point and allow the rand and South African factories and people the border should be open between South Africa and Zimbabwe to go back and forth without any restriction, so that this integration of the economy goes to pass, people, especially South African citizens and Zimbabwean citizens, so that the economy becomes one. But the political sovereignty remains the same, and we are not discussing about politics today. So when you look at my view about the solution, this is short term. You can come and claim your economic sovereignty somewhere in the future. I read somewhere that when Zimbabwe surrendered and said, "Look, we got to use the US dollar to do trade, the US dollar." Now, if you align the United States dollar to be used in the Zimbabwean economy, the United States is part of the ones who have imposed sanctions upon you, right? So they don't have your best interest at heart. They don't have your best interest at heart. When the US dollar decisions are made by the Reserve Bank of America, uh, they do that for the interest of the United States. That's why the US dollar becomes strong every other, tightening and strengthening it against all the other currencies and making it the centripetal part of any currency exchanges all over the world. So essentially, there was no way. I mean, in other words, the Zimbabwean government at that point, when it allowed the US dollar to prevail in Zimbabwe, it had surrendered its monetary sovereignty to United States of America, right? And for for Zimbabwe to come, because those experiments with currencies, those experiments with goods, because most of the goods are coming from South Africa anyway. The only solution now is not to do a piecemeal kind of solution, is to allow for South Africa economy to be part and parcel of Zimbabwean economy. That's what my view about the solutions, I mean, the hyperinflation and the economic situation of Zimbabwe at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kobe. Wow, that was really detailed. Maybe to respond to Joseph's question, yes, I'm sure recording will be posted on YouTube a few days to come. Mukai, we have to confirm that, but normally that's what happens. So going back to the discussion, I'm just going to throw around follow-up questions from what you guys have said. Maybe Pam, if you can talk about, how currently we recently had an investment act that came into law, and we know that we've got the African Continent Fair that's going to be launched in January. So how does that affect Zimbabwe, particularly given the situation that's currently in Zimbabwe? We're constantly talking about how there is going to be free movement of goods and persons, how the African Community Free Trade Area in itself is going to ensure that there is sustainable growth, there is economic growth in African countries. So is Zimbabwe in a position to be able to reap those benefits with what's currently happening right now?
Thank you for the question. I think as the earlier speaker alluded to, the solution would the solution to integrate the economies of South Africa and Zimbabwe. And if we speak presently, yes, we have a free trade agreement which is going to be effective as of January 2021 next year. And with that, we know that we're going to be free movement of goods and services, and also free movement of persons. So, in light of that, I think it's very important for the policymakers to take note of some of the solutions that can be put in place in order to ensure that the economy is stable for the investors and any other party or country wanting to trade with Zimbabwe, so that they have a bit of confidence in the economy. At the position with, like what we said, whatever high risk in trade like one with a credible economy at the moment. And it's very difficult there for other partners who want to trade without putting into place certain structures that ensure that there's a confidence with third parties. So some of the things that Zimbabwe could look into, besides what the areas we allude to, we could look at adopting a currency-free banking systems where banks issue notes with minimum government regulation in as opposed to the Reserve Bank handling that responsibility. Another way to curb the unprecedented increase in prices so that the economy can stabilize is to restore consumer confidence. That is to reintroduce price controls on goods that are charged in foreign currency, because that has also been causing a lot of hyperinflation. And if someone wakes up and puts something $10, the next thing the other shop is putting the $12, well, that in itself causes the economy to start to inflate, which sometimes is unprecedented. Other ways we could look is to the agricultural sector, in light of the AFT, that would also be a good targeting power that would actually use. Zimbabwe has a comparative advantage in the agricultural and mining sector. Boosting these economies would then also, because we'll start to manufacture and to also have a positive impact on the economy. And I think the best way to start with the agricultural sector is the best way to revive, because it requires very minimum skills and basic knowledge, which most farmers already have. And it is not dependent on the factors of production besides inputs and obviously the climatic environment. Manufacturing, on the other hand, would be a little slower because of infrastructural issues and infrastructural deficits. And also we have a lot of drone trade, so it might be a little bit difficult the manufacturing, even though it could be an opportunity Zimbabwe could use to drive its economy. But like earlier alluded to, adopting the rand, maybe not in the event that the integration of economies between South Africa and Zimbabwe, adopting the rand, the sole currency of the country, would definitely be very beneficial as opposed to using the US dollars, as earlier spoken of, because of the position that South Africa and Zimbabwe have in the good relationship here, and also because we're within one regional bloc, the SADC region, and there's been a lot of migration between Zimbabwe and South Africa. So it would only make much more sense economically to then adopt the rand as the main currency, and then that would do away with the different currencies we have, because presently there's a lot of currencies that are used. That in itself also causes a lot of inflation. We have the eco cash for money, we have the RGS, we have the US dollar, we have the Zimbabwe dollar, which is the good note. So adopting one currency would also be a way to stabilize the economy, so that when free trade agreement comes, one is in a very good position to take advantage. Zimbabwe is rich, rich in resources, and it's very rich in the agriculture. So this is not an opportunity that Zimbabwe would want to miss. We would want to make sure that we're fully on board and make sure that the free trade agreement benefits the population at large by ensuring that the economy is a little bit more stable than it is.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It seems as if our panelists are suggesting that we really consider joining the RAN union. Well, maybe if I may ask Kobe to come in and speak about, you started this conversation on economic integration, particularly with South Africa, and we have highlighted the reasons as to why you particularly feel Zimbabwe to join its economies with South Africa. The same reasons that were echoed by Pam. So I just wanted to ask that, there is a lot of talk around regional integration and everything, proposals that eventually we need to probably get to a point where Africa starts using just one currency and all that. So I wanted to ask that, looking at the economic disparities that exist between most countries, let's say Zimbabwe and South Africa, having to integrate the economy, doesn't it then have a ripple effect on the stronger economy, whose currency would be then used in another country?
Yes, yes. Integrating the economies is a double-edged sword for, especially for Zimbabwe, right? We're taking just a micro example of integrating the Zimbabwean economy with that of South Africa. Before even we look at the larger African, economic blocks, ECOWAS, SADC, COMESA, East African Community. If you look at the smaller scale of Zimbabwe and South Africa, in the beginning, it will look as if Zimbabwe is losing. It is losing, of course. What is it losing? It's losing its economic sovereignty, right? And monetary sovereignty at the same time. But it still controls the level of decision making or law. It can legislate and decide that it can reverse what it is set in motion. Now, putting the rand in the center of the medium of exit between Zim and South Africa, it's that, as Pam has alluded and has said, it's important because Zimbabwe and South Africa are very close in terms of culture and in terms of how many people now are in Zimbabwe who migrated to South Africa. And that migration has been taking place for a long, long time. Secondly, the rand has been a very strong currency in the Southern African region because it is, I think, convertible one-to-one. I think it is convertible one-to-one with the Swatini, Mane, Lilangen, the Maruti of Lesotho, and the Namibian dollar, right? So there is already a kind of integration which is taking place within the currency domain within those four countries I've mentioned. Now, if you go to any supermarket in Botswana, if you go to any supermarket in Namibia, Mozambique, these products are mostly coming from made in South Africa. Now, it is a matter of confirming or asserting that, or stamping representation. Look, we've been having products on our shelves from South Africa. South Africa is the workshop of this region, and all the products can come without much imposing a lot of taxation and all that sort of things, and come and bring them to Zimbabwe, and then they be the products which are being traded. The advantage is this. The advantage is that South African products will find market in Zimbabwe. And therefore, South African will view it as expansion of their own market. At the same time, the Zimbabwean economy, in the beginning, it will have to suffer some shocks, economic shocks, because they will have surrendered the economic and monetary sovereignty. But then again, in the long run, the economy of Zimbabwe will imitate the economy of South Africa. Now, it has been mentioned that Zimbabwe has got a lot of resources. Of course, it was the breadbasket of Africa sometimes before the crisis set in 1998. And they have got huge reserves of minerals. They have got, the whole of Zimbabwe is green. There is no desert or any other sort of thing. They have got tourism, they go mining, they got everything. The only thing which they will do that because they want to circumvent the economic sanctions. This could have been done earlier on. It could have been done way in 1998, 99, let's say about after 2002 when the economic sanctions were put in place. This could have happened about 2005, 2006. But then again, if you attempt to explain why that did not happen, you'll have to deep into politics, and we are not discussing about politics today. So the simple answer is that Zimbabwe joining the RAND, Zimbabwe integrating its economy and its money with South Africa is an expansion of the market. And in the long run, in the short term, it will be a disadvantage for Zimbabwe because they will lose their sovereignty, as I said, in economics and monetary terms. But at the same time, in the long run, the economy of Zimbabwe will be that of South Africa. And then again, if they wanted to reclaim that, to take that back, they can register and say, well, we are introducing a Zimbabwean dollar. That will be maybe after 10 years when they are sure enough, the policymakers are sure enough that the economy has recovered sufficiently. Then they can take that back and say, well, we're introducing our dollar. It happened in some other countries. They are going also to say that, they've opened new economic or trade deals rather with other countries in the region or in other parts of the world. Now, the last point is about economic integration in Africa. In Africa, we have the problem of leadership and politics. I don't want to go there, but that is happening gradually. It's happening. The economic integration is taking place. The economic blocks, the ECOWAS, SANDC, COMESA, East African Community, the Maghreb in the north, gradually they will come together and form one economic trading bloc, what we have emphasized, and most of us have seen as the United States of Africa, with one single currency, which people call the AFRO, AFRO. And that is going to happen because there is no other way of going forward in terms of trade, in terms of commerce, in terms of business. There is no other way in where Africa is going towards, because the documents at the African Union at the moment, they are studying the document of the integration of the European Union. So we are good imitators. We will eventually end up being like the European Union and with a single currency. But then I don't bet anything about the president. Those are politics. But we are going there in the next, maybe the next 50 years or so. We should be, 2060, we should be having a single currency, one economic trading bloc, which is functional, not just speaking, which is functional. So we are getting there, but we are getting there at the speed of a snail.
I would like to respond to your submission, Mr. Biko, if you allow me to.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So, the problem with the topic is that we have failed to touch politics at least 1%, because I don't think the Zimbabwean issue is a purely economical issue, but it is the after effects of a political problem. If you were referring to the period when we used the multiple currency bucket system, if I named it correctly, the economy stabilized. It worked well, perfect, simply because the political question was solved. We had nobody in the street where everybody was on one table, a form of consensus on the political space, which I think is the primary solution for Zimbabwe. The during the rent union is a bit problematic because now we will now have to be dependent on South Africa, which is a problem because we differ with them. Though we are neighbors, but we differ significantly in terms of political ideology, even directions in terms of our future plans. Though we are under one umbrella, it also causes some problems. And number two, we have no production whatsoever. So joining the Rand Union is futile because you can still use the South African rand, any currency that you want. So if we have no production or anything happening, we only have to use South African products. Then I don't think that will change our position. It will just put us in a space where we are dominated by South Africans. Our Zimbabwean government, companies might even struggle to to enter the South African market spaces because if we look at the space right now, most of the Zimbabwean products they are in the informal sector. And if it's a Zimbabwean product, they rebrand it and they change it to try and make it South African before they can sell it to the public, which is also, I think, it's a bad move because they don't put it on the market as we manufacture it in Zimbabwe. They try and add value here in South Africa, even for a perfect brand. So I think the solution for a current common currency would probably come from us having a COMESA. Um, COMESA, there's tripartite agreement, if I'm pronouncing it properly. I think that if, in terms of the currency, that is a better solution because the Rand Union is a bit problematic. If you study the countries that you mentioned, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, they are just all part of South Africa, and really, it's just South African companies and the South African market expanding. Just one country going up while other countries they are wherever they are, and there's no improvement whatsoever. Though their currency systems are perfect, I must admit.
Okay.
Well, go
Thank
ahead.
you so
Go ahead.
much, Taku. So maybe if I could go back to Kobe, just maybe briefly in probably 3 minutes, you wanted some in 2 minutes or so, you had something that you wanted to say, and also maybe to respond to the question that was raised by Cosmos that, right, we have heard what you've suggested, but apart from that, is there anything else that the Zimbabwean government could possibly try to look at to make sure that it alleviates the situation that's in Zimbabwe right now?
Well, Cosmas has raised a very pertinent point, and it's very clear what he's saying is the truth about the problem of accessing the solutions of the Zimbabwean economic crisis. The economic crisis of that sort, which has been manufactured by politicians, which he said he talked to very well, is very difficult to actually cure using the political way only. You cannot cure that problem of Zimbabwe without involving the politician. Now, Zimbabwean problem or solution is a bitter pill to swallow. Is a very bitter pill to swallow. Unless there's a strategy where people sit around and map out where Zimbabwe should be in the next 10 or 15 years, having these short-term solutions which have been tried again and again and have failed is not going to lead this country anyway. It's not going to lead Zimbabwe anyway. The idea that the Zimbabwe political elite is not willing to surrender the economic and the monetary sovereignty is real. It's true that they don't want to surrender that. And because they don't want to surrender that, because they are the policy makers, then it is very difficult to assign a particularized solution to the Zimbabwe economic crisis. If in the short term, because most of these solutions which have been put out have been just piecemeal kind of solutions. They have not been the one which are long thought out and so forth and so on. The idea is to be willing to give in now, substantially to give in surrendering the sovereignty in terms of the monetary and the economic sovereignty, and then gain after a period of time. It should be 10 years down the line or 15 years. The solution of the economic solution in Zimbabwe cannot be solved by any other, because there are many other solutions which somebody can think about. The ones you asked about, the moderator, then you asked about what other alternatives are there for the Zimbabwean situation. But even if you put out any other solution, looking at the geopolitics of the area, it's very difficult not to see Zimbabwe surrendering its economy and its industries for the short while, right? So that it can allow its industry to grow using the support of the South African economy. It's a bitter pill to swallow at the moment, because it's not easy to be a leader and then surrender your economic situation, your industries, your manufacturers, and more importantly, maybe in the short term, the duty, the taxes which are charged on goods which come into the country, right? But that one has to be put aside if at all anyone is going to think outside the box and put Zimbabwe into a recovery path, economic recovery path in the next 10 years, because this can never be a quick fix. There is no magic bullet in this. It's supposed to be done. It's a painful process, and it's supposed to be done from the economic planners and policymakers. They should involve politicians who are willing to see Zimbabwean solution in the next 10 years. It will never be a short-term, fix, if I can put it that way. The other solutions which can be discussed is COMESA currency. Well, COMESA, that I don't know how long it will take, because sometimes we hear about the African free trade area and then it may take many countries, they don't want to sign, they don't want to do this. Altogether, it will move slowly at the speed of the tortoise. That's what I alluded to previously. So the idea of Zimbabwe to not surrender its economy and the currency at the moment, for the next, I don't think it will be a good idea. They should do that and then look forward for the next 10 years or decade or so.
Okay, thank you so much for that contribution. Pam, if I may in the conversation and talk about the currency, the monetary situation in Zimbabwe. Now that we have got the Zim dollar, which you have rightfully spoken that it's going up and down, and there is the black market. We now also have mobile money in Zimbabwe. So if you may probably talk more about what's happening with regards to mobile money and whether it is made the situation better or it has actually made it worse. I know mobile money is something that you're really passionate about. So maybe if you can just summarize the whole thing, because we are running out of time.
All right. Thank you for the question. I think just to summarize how mobile money initially started, I think in Zimbabwe it's something which was pushed down on people, so to say, because mobile money started off just as no exchange between mobile users. But because of the lack of cash caused by the economic cash, mobile money became an alternative to buy goods and to transact within each other, to pay for bills, to pay for fees, to virtually for all your financial services. You could basically use mobile money. So what would usually happen is that if you have cash, let's say US dollars, when you go on the black market, that US dollars is put into the mobile money and it becomes, you use the black market rate, it becomes actually inflated. So there are two sides to the coin. While it's really alleviated that burden of having a cashless system, it can be returned to cash, which is good because people now transact. Virtually everyone is using mobile money in Zimbabwe as we speak. But it's also been it's also had a big disadvantage because it somehow has caused inflation because of what I'm saying, that there's a thing whereby you call burning money, so to say. When you burn money, when you put it in mobile money, it becomes times 10 once time. So that also causes inflation. So the government has also tried to sort of regulate how mobile money can then be used and how we can regulate that hyperinflation, because it also has that effect, as much as it's really been a savior, but it also has. So I think the best way to go is to put in place policies and a legal framework. I know now, as of I think about a couple of months ago, there was an executive instrument that was passed that allows an interoperable system which allows you to send your mobile money to another mobile money user, which is not necessarily cash. So you're then allowed to change the mobile, like to transact with different mobile money users from different networks and back into your bank, which is good because it then increases the customer base and it also gives value because you're then allowed to transact with other mobile users outside of your current business. So I think tax instruments are a positive thing and they're a step in the right direction. I think it's up to the policymakers to ensure that put enabling environment so that mobile money can be properly regulated and actually help in this part of the economic challenges of not having cash. It's actually a good goal if all the correct structures could be put into place and how to regulate it. I think it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Kobe, going back to you, maybe if you've got something that you would want to say with regards to mobile money, Zimbabwe moving to a cashless society, how then does that tie with your main argument that maybe we need to really consider joining the Rand Association? And maybe also, may you probably tell us what you think African countries have to do, particularly with regards to the sanctions issue. I know that there was a time that there was more or less like a joint concerted effort by most African governments, or more or less speaking against the sanctions that are in Zimbabwe that have been imposed by the global north. So apart from the hashtags that were ongoing on social media and press statements by leaders of governments in different African countries, what else can they do? What else can the Greater Africa, the United Africa do to ensure that this whole sanction situation is dealt with?
Thank you very much. Pam has mentioned about the mobile money, which is a very good step forward. We all familiar about something like M-Pesa, which is a currency mobile money transfer software, which is in East Africa from Kenya actually, and it's kind of replaced banking and made transaction easy. You can pay a taxi with that. You can pay for your food with that. You can buy even groceries in the informal sector too. Anywhere you can function with the M-Pesa, right? So if Zimbabwe takes after that, that's very good. Secondly, we have to remember that we have to connect currency with products, right? If Zimbabwean monetary policy can be made in such a way they have a strong currency, which does not fluctuate in a very short, constant burst and up to the level where it arrives at hyperinflation. If Zimbabwe can have a stable currency, maybe a digital currency, a crypto currency, I don't know what it can be, which can be used on, mobile or phone, and, then that would be very good because it will attract, they will have solved the monetary issue, money currency issue, and now we attract people to come and trade because the currency is stable. The industries will start sprouting up, manufacturers, traders, FDI, foreign direct investment will just flow in Zimbabwe. If they can have a strong currency, they will have solved the problem of the industries, right? Now, the other question you have asked is about the solution which the African continent could work towards giving a solution to Zimbabwe. The African continent is, at the moment, its a voice is amplified by the African Union. The African Union is the mouthpiece of Africa, in as many areas as possible. Now, of which economy is one. The idea that the African Union is against the sanctions it has never endorsed any sanctions against Zimbabwe. Not even, I don't know even any other African countries has gone for sanctions. It does not do that because it is resolved to tackling these disagreements using the internal mechanisms, right? There is the African approach, which is not appreciated by the international community. So the African Union can just continue to, on the diplomatic front, to fight for the freeing of sanctions. There's no sanctions anymore in Zimbabwe. It should continue to be like that. It should have emissaries, lobbyists, ambassadors who are supposed to bring the case of Zimbabwe up in the international arenas now and again. But beyond that, the African Union does not have an economic mass. It does not have a sovereignty where it can say we are producing this or produce. So its activities are totally limited. The other thing is the SADC, which is a trading bloc of the southern countries. At the same time, it's also limited because if you go to SADC, the makeup of the SADC tribunal or any other, it's made up of countries. Zimbabwe is part of that, but most of those who are attending those who are part of that committee is that they are looking at the interests of their own countries. They would not really surrender their economic wellness, if you will, to cure the economic situation of Zimbabwe. So everybody is looking after themselves right there inside the SADC organization. So that leaves Zimbabwe in the open, right? It leaves Zimbabwe in the open. And this has been happening 2002, we're looking at 18 years now. And everyone has been supporting Zimbabwe. But why is that support just mouth deep? Why is it not, economically? Because African countries also are poor countries. And there's a question you mentioned about integrating countries which are, some are poor, some are rich. This is something which we have not been able to work out as the African continent. Because if you tell people, oh, let's have one currency, people say, oh, look at a country like Chad or Burundi or Mauritania. They'll say, no, the countries, those people sponge, they'll eat up as our economy up and that sort of thing. So essentially, Zimbabwe's situation is in a very tight corner at the moment. And only through deliberately surrendering some of their sovereignty can they look forward to have the economy back in the next 10 years.
Thank you so much. I think we are running out of time, but this was really a fruitful discussion. So maybe I will give each panelist 2 minutes to just give concluding remarks, closing this discussion. Then I'll hand over to Mukai after that. So I'll start with Pam. Just give us a 2-minute summary. What are the takeaways that you think everybody who's listening to this conversation should go home with? What would you suggest that the policymakers in Zimbabwe be mindful of?
Thank you. I think as we have discussed, at the end of the day, what we are saying is the Zimbabwean economy has a lot of potential actually back on its feet. And Zimbabwe has a lot of potential to still be better in Africa. And it's not something that is very far-fetched. It's perhaps, like the earlier speaker alluded to, these are just alternatives that can be looked into. The use of the rand is the main currency in Zimbabwe, is one of the alternatives which would really boost the economic situation. Zimbabwe could also adopt a currency board in the free banking system, where banks freely issue notes with minimum regulation. One of the other things that Zimbabwe could also look into is to have price controls. We introduced price controls in foreign currency since the government has recently moved to allowing partial liberalization of the economy, letting licensed retailers sell their goods in foreign currency should impose price caps on the basic goods, also see a boost in the economy. We also spoke about reviving the agricultural sector. I think a lot of policies have been put in place by the government which are doing really well on reviving the agricultural sector and the mining sector. That is where most of our raw materials come from. So if we could export, it would also have a good impact on the economy, as would be exporting raw materials to our European counterparts. Another way of reviving the economy would be to renegotiate or enter into negotiation with the parties that put the sanctions and to see a way forward. This might be so economic, but it's something that could be looked into because the sanctions really have had a negative impact on the economy, as Mr. Biku earlier pointed to. So if these could be tackled, and if some of them could be lifted, maybe on the key and critical area or industries, then this would also open up much more ways in which the economy would then have to boost itself. Zimbabwe can also negotiate a quasi HIPC, that's a heavily indebted poor country arrangement, with its creditors to reschedule, reduce its foreign debt, and re-establish access to international capital. This could also be a very good way to sort of not start afresh, but get into the market with less economic burden. Because right now, to get into the market with so much foreign debt, it would be very difficult because you're already working from a market. If a negotiation could be had to reduce the foreign debt and establish national capital markets and banks, then this could be a very good way to sort of start off. So I think in conclusion, these pretty much sum up what could be done.
So thank you so much, Pam. That was really profound. Kobe, if we can have your concluding remarks, your summary of the discussion.
Thank you so much for the opportunity again. To summarize, is to we without political goodwill, the economic situation in Zimbabwe cannot be sorted out. That is one of the things, and we've been limited in looking at only on one side of the coin, which is economics today. How to bust the moderator because I like politics, but then they could have eaten a lot on our discussion tonight. Nonetheless, the political goodwill is required to solve the problem, because if anybody the policymakers attempt anything, they have to have the blessing of the central governors, which is the political, networks. Now, without doing that, it's like putting, they say square pegs on round holes or something like that. It's not easy to solve the economic situation of Zimbabwe without participation of the politician. Number two, Zimbabwe will have to understand there's something known as teething problems. They'll have to swallow the bitter pill and surrender either the monetary sovereignty or the economic sovereignty, or both. There is no way in which this can be sorted out without having those kind of solutions. Apart from that, I see that the only other solution is Zimbabwe to wait for what happens in a free trade area, but then waiting without knowing what is going to come is very difficult because people are suffering at the moment. And when you have people suffering for those 18 years, 20 years, the political system is challenged because it can be overthrown. Zimbabwe policymakers will have to listen and come with a solution which will solve Zimbabwe's problem after 10 years. It cannot be solved in the short term. And that will involve actually surrendering some economic, financial, monetary, or trade sovereignty. There will be a lot of giving and take so that Zimbabwe comes back to where it was before the sanction time.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panelists for this fruitful discussion. I would also want to extend my gratitude to Africa Aisha for awarding us this opportunity to convene and discuss on such interesting issues. Maybe just to suggest to Africa Aisha, it seems as if we can't really talk about Zimbabwe without the Zimbabwean economy without getting into the political aspect of it. Maybe we do need a webinar where we talk about how the politics in Zimbabwe have so impacted economic situation. So without further ado, I think this discussion ends. Yeah. So thank you guys for tuning in. We can continue the conversation on the Africa iShape platforms, on Twitter, on Facebook, and even on LinkedIn. Thank you guys.
Thank you for watching the discussion. If you like the discussions, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos, and follow us on social media on Facebook, Africa Aisha platform, on Twitter, Africa Aisha. Thank you.